Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. So we have some of the good news coming from the front lines. You can see the blue region. It means that there was the successful Ukrainian counterattack. It happened not far away from Kupiansk. So before Russia crossed the Oskil River in this place toward this area, and they also managed to do the same operation a little bit northbound towards the direction of Novomlinsk, but the Ukrainian army managed to repel the Russian attack. So it was yesterday, the day before yesterday, yesterday and today. Also, if we go on the south, here this red area turned into the gray one. It means that Ukraine sent some of the reinforcements to push the Russian infantry out. Also, the weather improved, so Ukraine is able to use some of the FPV drones to hit the Russian infantry. Because Russians crossed the Oskil River just with their army men. There were roughly 20 persons who used the rubber boats for this operation. And they also did the same stuff over here. So after all, I guess that the Russian operation to cross the Oskil River went to the total failure, at least for now. And let's move to Syria. I just want to start this video from more or less good news for Ukraine at first, because yes, there are many of the forces like rebels, the Syrian National Army, who are now fighting against the Assad Army, SAA. And the battle is now ongoing here on the south for Hama already. So rebels are trying to encircle this very important settlement. And from that point, rebels may cross into the Mediterranean, basically cutting the largest military base for the Russian armed forces as well as the military port. I took this picture of the military map from the Russian channel and they are very concerned. I mean, the Russians are concerned about their military airfields because now the distance from rebel-controlled territory to the Russian airfield is roughly 35 kilometers, and as we understand, rebels now do have some of the rocket artillery systems which they've took from the Assad army, so they're ready to strike the Russian military if it is going to be used against them. This is the biggest Russian strategic military base, Hmeimim. Russia placed their fighter jets, also bombers. Hmeimim is also used as the supply hub for the Russian forces on their way even to Africa. Plus Russia has the naval base there, the only one. So if Russia loses those two very important bases, they'll lose their influence not just in Syria but also in Africa. However, there is the obstacle for rebels because this is kind of the high elevation on their way. It's not easy to cross this pass. So for them to reach this airfield, they need to go first of all to the south more and take this road on the way to the airfield. So just to show you the satellite image, here you can definitely see the mountains. So this valley is now getting control under the rebel forces, and this is the Russian airfield of Hmeimim, Russian base. Strangely, but on this satellite image we don't see many of the airplanes, just some of the transport aviation, and the fighter jets are placed over here, just two of them. Well, maybe those images are quite old. There is one more airplane. This is Sukhoi 24 tactical bomber, but there could be some of the Russian planes inside of those hangars, and I see the Russian helicopter Ka-52. But still, it is the Russian military base abroad which Russia uses a lot. It is understandable that Russia will try to defend this base, and we'll see if rebels finally will be able to capture, for example, this city. It's a town, Al-Ashrenah, and take this only way, I would say, possible to go to reach this airfield. So for sure Russia will send some of the forces to block the passage for the rebels across the mountains. At the same time, American forces start to use their aviation against the Assad army in Deir Resort, and they help the Syrian Democratic Forces. So altogether, they were able to push the Assad army away across the river. This province is very important for whoever controls it because the most of the oil is placed in here. So as I say, there are lots of the influence from any kind of the side: Turkey, Russia, America, and on the ground there are lots of the other militant forces. Also there was ISIS, not as active as before, but they are presented. Some of the different militia, oppositions, rebels and Assad forces. It's the big mix. So it's kind of interesting that in such a country there are so many armies which fight against each other. It's crazy what is happening in Syria. Well, about this Hama city, which is actually crucial for the rebel forces to advance further, well, they've took the ground and they trying to encircle it. The yellow area is actually the gray zone where the fighting is ongoing. Here you can see the military airfield, and the Assad army is not willing actually to leave Hama as they left Aleppo before. It means that there could be the big fight for Hama. Assad understands that after Hama there is almost direct way towards Damascus, so he'll try to do everything to secure it. And according to the latest information, rebels took more ground near Hama, so they will probably try to move from this side, from the eastern side, cutting the supply roads for the Assad army. Meanwhile, in the North Syria, the Syrian National Army also continued the advancement. By the way, my friends, if you want to support the job that I do on YouTube, you may also follow me on Patreon. I'll put the link for my Patreon page right in the video description below. Thank you so much for supporting my motivation. And this is the Russian Smerch rocket artillery system with a range up to 60 kilometers as far as I remember for characteristics. So definitely rebels may use it to target the Russian military airfield in Khmeimim. And they have some of the missiles there. Probably they also captured some extra ammunition for this vehicle. And I would say that the vehicle is serviceable. It was captured on a way of retreatment, so Assad army was evacuating its forces not far away from the Hama city, but rebels were fast. They ambushed the Assad army convoy and took all of the belongings. And here we have the video showing the A-10 Thunderbolt 2 in operation. It's in Deir ez-Zor province where Americans are backing the Kurdish forces. Also, it's been reported that Americans used AC-130. It is basically flying machine gun and artillery system. A very capable tool against the ground forces, especially when those ground forces do not have the air defense capabilities. As we saw on the video, the A-10 was flying more or less okay, no one shoots it. It means that Americans do have the air superiority in this area. Here we have the video from Al-Nairab air base, not far away from Aleppo. This is destroyed, I would say, Mi-8 helicopter. It's definitely in terrible state. Maybe some of the avionics and engines are serviceable still. Here you can see lots of the L-39 training airplanes, and here again. But those could be also used for the combat missions. They are not in a good state, so maintenance for sure is required. Also, we have the information that Russia has removed its ships from the military port. It means that they do afraid that Syrian rebels may harm their ships using, for example, the rocket artillery systems. Meanwhile, the Russian representative in United Nations Nebeza said that Ukraine organized some of the terrible events for Russia happening in Syria, that the Ukrainian commanders are directly involved in this rebel operation of the Syrian rebels. Well, I would say that Turkey is involved more in this case. I don't think that Ukraine has definitely resources to act far away from its borders. But obviously this situation is very profitable for Ukraine, and the West found one more spot to pressure Russia for the possible agreements around Ukrainian topic. Like right now it's up to Turkey and the United States of America to decide whether to leave Assad's regime or to kaput it completely. I think that they do have the capabilities to get rid of Assad. In this case, Russia will have the direct military loss in Syria with all of those military bases, airplanes, whatever, but the most hard loss for Russia and the most important one will be a reputational one, because really Russia saved the Assad's regime at some time, so they have the reputation of the savers of dictators. That's why some of the dictatorship countries start to work with Russia. But you know, if Russia cannot protect their friend Assad, what's the security guarantees Russia may implement for others? And Putin personally will also show his weakness, because they operate in mafia format in Russia, the FSB mafia. So if Putin decides not to protect his friend Assad, he might also decide not to protect his other friends, and it will be a very big concern in this mafia elite. And this is the most recent map published. It shows that the rebel forces are trying to get into Hama already. The fighting is ongoing at the edge of the city line. And this is the recent map near Hama. So Hama is over there, so over here somewhere. And rebels are taking this ground, the vast lands, and their goal is to advance towards this highway to cut the supplies for Hama. But there is also the road from the south, so Hama will not be cut completely, but they want mainly to encircle it from different points, and if they intercept this highway, they may advance from the east. For now, they have two vectors of attacks over here and the big encirclement operation. Small encirclement and big one. We'll see which one works for them. And this map was published before, so Syrian forces tried to counterstrike from Hama. It is shown with this arrow, but it didn't work after all, so rebels are attacking it from different of the points, and they're already very close to Hama. And they are actually already fighting in this settlement. The next is Homs, and the next is Damascus. And here's the Russian port, the Russian Navy base of Tartus. And just look at those territorial gains in just few of the days. It's really impressive. I would say that it's comparable to the Russian attack on Ukraine back in 2022, especially in the south, or you may compare it with the Ukrainian liberation operation also back in 2022 in the Kharkiv region. Then the Russian forces were caught off guard and they were just leaving their positions, dropping their tanks and vehicles. So by the time Ukraine gained lots of the armored vehicles from the Russian army. And so far Russia has supplied more tanks for Ukraine than all of our allies combined. Yes, we speak only about the tanks, not the general military support, no. And you know, from what I can see, the Assad army could be even encircled in some of the places, because rebels are definitely fast in their movements. However, to access the sea, obviously terrain is the factor, so they will not move that fast in this place, at least I predict it. Did you know that the Wagner army also has its own air force? For example, in Mali, they used the L-39 Albatros, exactly the same aircraft type which were captured by the rebels in Syria. So how Wagner uses those airplanes in Mali? Well, basically as a bomber. They put the FAB 100 or 120. It is kind of the small light variant of the aviation bomb, but still it's more devastating compared to artillery shell. So actually those airplanes are not for the training purpose only, they're being used for the combat missions. So Wagner does exist, and they even have some of the airplanes. Yes, it's not MiG, it's not Sukhoi, but nevertheless their pilots fly and they have this combat experience. Let's go briefly to South Korea and how this guy, his name is Yoon Suk-yeol, tried to organize the military coup in his country and take the full power. Well, I spoke with two of the followers from South Korea and they've told me that mainly Koreans do not like this president. He and his wife were involved in corruption scandals. He was elected back in 2022 with just a light margin of 0.7%. But after the parliament elections, the opposition party got the majority, so there is now the conflict between president and parliament. Recently, parliament decided to impeach some of the team members of the president, but not president himself so far. But probably Mr. Yoon was afraid for his team or himself, so today he called military to capture the parliament. He introduced the martial law in the country. Well, military went to the place, to the parliament, but still members of parliament were able to vote for cancellation of the martial law. And according to the South Korean constitution, the president should sign the cancellation. That's what he did a few minutes ago, by the way. So basically his attempt to become a dictator failed completely. I also monitored the social media, and yes, South Koreans do not really support the president. Well, he has some of the percentage of the support, but not huge. Before the military coup it was 23%, but after this I guess he'll have even lower. And maybe very soon he will also be impeached by the South Korean parliament for organizing this madness. Because you know, then you cancel the operation of the media and everything. I compare it with dictatorship. Well, luckily it's mostly over now. I do not expect some of the hard tensions in South Korea. And by the way, he also called the opposition party, which took majority in parliament, so it's now the ruling party, so he called them communists, and that they're working for North Korea, which from my perspective is absolutely not possible. So he's just blaming the force, which is not good for him personally. That's the normal politician stuff, you know. Politicians always chase their personal advantage. They put it in front of the other people. It's happening everywhere. Like what happened recently in the United States, then Joe Biden pardoned his son Hunter Biden, but you know, the accusations of Hunter were not such dramatic, I would say. Honestly guys, if I was Joe, I would definitely do the same stuff. After all, it's, you know, your family, but before I wouldn't tell that I'll never do it, I'll never pardon him. No. By the way, Donald Trump at the end of his term also pardoned some of his relatives, or the relatives of his relatives. Well, every American president pardons someone, and sometimes those someone are their friends, relatives. So politicians, as I say to you, always follow their own advantage. Just a clarification, President of South Korea haven't yet signed the end of the martial law in the country, but he said that he will do it during the conference in the parliament. Alright, now let's go back to the Ukrainian topic. The Kursk operation still continues, and as I promised to you, Ukraine started to use the aviation more effectively, more massively. For example, it was the JDAM strike on a Russian position, the Russian headquarters, temporary headquarters in Kursk. Russians assaulted towards this big building and they placed their command center there, and the building was kaputted by JDAM. So Ukraine this time used the MiG-29s for this mission, but I expect that Ukraine gets more of the F-16s, it will use them also in the Kursk region if this operation continues by the time, or in other different frontline direction. An interesting video of the Russian attack. Here you can see a cyclist in the front, and behind there is the Russian armored vehicle. So the cyclist probably knows the proper direction. They went there with infantry forces, so he leads his armored vehicles. The first time I see this picture. So really, a cyclist, it's not the motorized vehicle, no, he just pedals it hard, and behind there is the BMP. This is how they attack, advance. And some of the Russian soldiers are coming home. Definitely there are lots of the new cemeteries opened elsewhere in Russia, because they have absolute tremendous losses. The losses of Russia in this war surpass the losses for the 10-year military conflict of Soviet Union and Afghanistan by many of the times. So totally Soviet Union lost 18,000 soldiers in Afghanistan. Now Russia has around 700,000 soldiers lost in this war. It's all together with wounded, but KA is also a lot. Russians also tried to attack in Krakow direction with kind of the big convoy, but that convoy was kaputted by Ukrainian drone operators. The vehicles, all vehicles, were destroyed, mostly with the help of the FPV drones. I wonder how Russia is still capable to find some of the armored vehicles. Based on all of the videos we witnessed, my friends, they have absolute tremendous losses. It seems like they are on their final jump, sending absolutely everything they have, and they don't care about the losses. This is a stupid way to waste the resources, actually. Yes, they get more ground each day because, for example, after this mid-wave they send one more, and some is successful. But the cost of the fields, villages and settlements which Russia occupies, it's tremendous for them. And this is the tourist direction. From what I understood, the Azov brigade, tank brigade, was sent to fight in Toretsk. So far it is quite successful there. Again guys, most of those videos I share on my Telegram channel. You may find it in the link below. The Telegram is for free. You basically go there, subscribe, and check out the recent news around Ukraine, because mostly at first I share the information there. Oh, our good old friend Tucker Carlson visits Moscow. Wow! If it was my will, I would move him there permanently. I'll expedite him a little to listen what he says here.
A week since we left Russia, Moscow, where we are now, in February after interviewing Vladimir Putin, we've watched from the United States as the Biden administration has driven the U.S. ever closer to a nuclear conflict with Russia, the country that possesses the world's largest nuclear arsenal. It has accelerated ever since, and it's reached its apogee so far in the weeks after Trump's election. He's now the president-elect. In that time, just a few weeks ago, the Biden administration, American military personnel, launched missiles into mainland Russia and killed at least a dozen Russian soldiers. So we are, unbeknownst to most Americans, in a hot war with Russia, an undeclared war, a war you did not vote for and that most Americans don't want, but it is ongoing. And because of that war, because of the fact that the U.S. military is killing Russians in Russia right now, we are closer to nuclear war than at any time in history. Far closer than we were during the Cuban Missile Crisis. That would mean the elimination of Russia, the United States, and most of the rest of the world. We felt there must be someone behind the scenes in Washington working to make sure that this conflict doesn't become a nuclear holocaust. But we found out that no, in fact, there is nobody. Tony Blinken, the current Secretary of State, cut off all contact between the U.S. and Russian governments. There is no back channel, there is no conversation, there hasn't been for more than 2 years. That's shocking. Meanwhile, most Americans have no access to any perspective other than that granted to them by NBC News and the New York Times. They don't know how close we are. They don't know the Russian perspective. We've been trying for over a year to get that perspective out to American news consumers. We've also tried for over a year to get an interview with Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. We've attacked that from a bunch of different angles. We've spoken to a lot of different people around him, had dinner with them. We've been in talks continuously, and those efforts have been thwarted by the U.S. government. The American embassy in Kiev, which our tax dollars pay for, told the Zelensky government, no, you may not do the interview. You can talk to CNN, you can't talk to us. So we've been unable to speak to him. So we came back to Moscow yesterday to interview the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, the longest serving foreign minister in the world. He's been a part of this government for 25 years. He's been in the diplomatic corps for over 40. And ask him, where exactly are we? Are we headed toward an unprecedented conflict between Russia and the United States? Is there any way to peel Russia back from the east, from the sphere of China, back into the west? Is that alliance permanent? And does the election of Donald Trump mean an end to this war, which is reshaping the world, the U.S. economy, the global economy, and risking the life of every person on this planet? Is that possible? We just walked out of that interview. It's absolutely fascinating. It's coming very soon. We hope you'll watch.
Oh, that's the paid Russian propaganda, nothing more. So they want to threaten usual Americans, like ordinary Americans, with some sort of the possible nuclear war. But Russia will never use nukes on NATO countries. It will be just a suicide step for Putin. He likes power, he likes his life, he would never do it. They're just spreading this pro-Russian propaganda with this Tucker Carlson's visit. The sad thing that this guy is kind of the close ally of the new White House administration as well. So there are lots of the Russian puppets there in Republican Party in Congress. We see it like Major Taylor Greene, and there are lots of the people spreading the Russian bullshit, as well as this guy spreading the same stuff on his channel. And what is also kind of interesting, and I cannot understand that this guy is kind of popular. He is conspiracy theorist. He's doing lots of the job for the pro-Russian propaganda. So why people watch him? I'm out of clue. His last interview with Putin was painful to watch, mainly because not of Tucker Carlson, but because of Putin and his sick brain historical lesson for more than 30 minutes of the interview. Well, I guess that Lavrov will be more straightforward, but Russia commits war crimes, and Carlson goes there to Russia to interview those people responsible. It's like interview Hitler, Goebbels, and so on. Some say that it's journalism, but no, it's spreading the Russian propaganda. And also the Russian threats with the Oreshnik missile and so on. So basically they want to force American population to push their politicians to change the policy towards supporting Ukraine with weaponry. It's better to cancel the military support of Ukraine and let it go to Russia than to start a nuclear war with the Russian Federation, the country that has the most nuke warheads or nuclear warheads. I see how this propaganda was spread among the X platform a lot. Also, the most famous podcaster Joe Rogan spread his word accusing Ukraine, Zelensky and Ukrainian people for basically fighting for their own lives and defending Ukraine against the Russian attacks. Sadly, guys, but I need to admit that our Western democratic world fails this war in the informational field. I get tons of the questions, mostly from the bots, that why am I not fighting in Ukrainian army? I'm fighting here, guys, presenting different values, different than this one maybe. The war is not just happening out there on the front lines, it is everywhere. Influencers like me, like Tucker Carlson, we compete for your attention, for your ideas. Luckily, this service gives me some platform to speak. I don't have the independent media source. We may also change the world politics, like that is what Tucker Carlson tries to do under the influence of Russia. Judging on his rhetorics, I'm almost sure that it is happening like that. It's just my own personal opinion, my feeling, intuition. So we'll see in the coming days, and then he publishes this interview. Probably I'll film my own reaction on that. Could be interesting. So guys, after the strike on Dnipro by arresting missile, nothing really changed from the perspective of the Western politicians. All of the Russian threats went nowhere. Putin understood that, and he tries to say again many times about his powerful arresting missile that they're gonna use again and again on Ukraine, the same missile, but definitely didn't work. That's why they start to use the opinion leaders to spread their message around. It sounds really funny as for me, because I know the reality, but some people in the West may think that Putin definitely may use nukes against them. Right, guys, we have the latest military update, and unfortunately Russia takes the ground with their midwaves. The situation is the most difficult in Kurakhove direction. Well, according to the latest information I have delivered by our commanders, the Ukrainian army has withdrawn the forces from Kurakhove completely. So now the forces of Ukrainian army is located in the thermal electrical power station. By the way, the station was bombed a couple of times with the Russian gliding aviation bombs, but still there are some of the basements, so Ukrainian army is capable to hide there for some time. But definitely Ukraine should withdraw the forces from this direction as well as from this one. So there's the change for the last 24 hours. You can see the brace of the Russian army towards Suhy Yali. It's located in this place. So they basically cut this road. The Russian Telegram channel say that they've encircled the Ukrainian army in this direction, but so far we don't have the proofs of that message. Ukraine just withdraws the forces little by little from this pocket. There is also change in the Pokros direction. Russia moves more closer. As I say to you, they want to expand this bridgehead later on to attack Pokros from Shevchenko. So it was yesterday and today. Again, you can see how the front line changes every day, but there are some of the Ukrainian counterattacks, as I showed to you in the beginning of this video, but that happens very rarely. And in the areas with the poor logistics for the Russian army, where there are no roads, or for example with obstacles like rivers. As for the rest parts of the front lines, the fight continues. There were no significant changes. At first I commented on my Telegram, just a random base jumper in Canada, but later on I saw that it's Matterhorn. I didn't know that Matterhorn is located in Canada. Well, thank you for the geographic lesson from the Donald Trump. Here the flag also should be red and white, but just a little different, It's so funny sometimes to look at the media of those populist politicians. Guys, with all of that stuff coming from the politicians and also mainly from Russia, by the way, I should create a new type of the videos reacting on the cringe stuff from Russia or from United States in this case. Like yesterday I showed you this picture also, it was kind of funny. The Scholz is... He definitely lost his boot after speaking with Zelensky. A couple of words about what is happening in Georgia. There are some of the protests still continue for the 6th consecutive day. Well, after all, with the help of the other experts, I analyzed this situation, and definitely it doesn't look like the situation in Ukraine, which happened in 2013, that the revolution started. After all, the vast part of the Georgian society voted for the pro-Russian party. So let's say they accepted the moves of this party. It was actually in their program that they don't want to go to Europe if they got elected, and really the elections were after all more or less fair. But again, there is also the vast part of the Georgian society which is not okay with this development vector, and I may understand them. I would also not be okay with that. It's kind of strange to have the pro-Russian party, then your country was attacked by Russia, and also partially occupied with the proxy countries created, like for example Abkhazia or North or South Ossetia. All of that is Georgia. About the possible peace talks, well, that the informational field around Ukraine is overwhelmed with the possible peace agreements. Well, I don't think that it is really possible because, first of all, Russia doesn't want to negotiate with Ukraine. So today, Peskov said that they are not looking for some sort of the negotiations now with Ukraine. They openly say it. The NATO Secretary Mark Rutte also said that it's better not to negotiate nowadays with Russia. He suggested Ukraine not to negotiate. On the other hand, Ukraine says that it is ready to negotiate, but it needs the robust security guarantees, and the only security guarantee acceptable is the NATO membership. So NATO 5th article should be applied on Ukrainian controlled territory. But what is the Ukrainian controlled territory after all if Russian forces continue to move each day? So before there should be ceasefire, and only after that some sort of the NATO membership. But we have two of the main problems here. First of all, many of the NATO countries do not see Ukraine as the NATO member. You probably know those countries, and the United States, by the way, is one of them. And also Russia doesn't want to stop because they don't want Ukraine to be a NATO member. They don't want Ukraine to be secure. That's why they will continue their attacks, just taking Ukrainian territory little by little. So honestly, I don't see any sort of the future perspective for the agreements in the coming years. I see Russian economy collapse in the coming years. Maybe that's why Russia finally would agree on some sort of the ceasefire negotiations, but the probability of it is very, very low. For now, Russia planned the military budget for the next year for around 145 billion United States dollars. It's the record budget, and compared with the Ukrainian military budget and uncertainty in the future support from some of our key allies. So for the next year, at least, Russia plans a full-scale war in Ukraine. Well, guys, no matter what, I'm gonna keep you updated on situation in Ukraine. And now I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.